Hey,
Morning, Richard.
Can you guys hear me?
I can.
Can you hear me?
Yep. No one needs
Okay.
to be gone.
I don't know why my camera's not working. I have it on.
Zoom, every time I get on Zoom, they've added more features that make it more difficult to figure out how to use the thing.
They said I have to say which video to use.
Yeah. So
Oh,
you
there we
pick
go.
the standards, pick everything, and then you have to
Works.
start video.
It works on FaceTime apparently, but not anything else.
Yeah. So in the top right corner is a three buttons or three dots. You click on that and start video.
Hi everyone, I'm going to be off camera, but listening I'm not a swimmeat, so if you don't want all that background information. Hi Richard, it's really nice to see you.
Good morning.
Good luck with the swim meet.
Thank you. This is day 2, I'm 10 hours a day.
Is this the start of the season or the end?
It's the start of the summer season, but we're coming up to this year. But we like to get one last day to see the 7 miles, so get ready for the lake run.
Yeah. Nice.
All right, I'm going on mute.
I'll be right back. My dog's going to jump in the pool every 2 minutes if I don't get him inside.
Hello.
Get in here.
Hey, Don.
What do you think you're doing? Get in here. You're not, no, come here. Come here. Come here. Come to me. Get in here. Get in here.
Yeah, buddy.
Stay.
Yeah, I think Marianne's hopping on, and Mike said he could join. And I know Justin can't join, and David can't join.
Well, then, will you tell me when everybody who's joining is on, and I will, with no further ado, try to start answering some questions and giving some details.
Oh, Marianne says her Zoom's not working. Let me send it to
There
her.
you go. It's always something.
There's always something. And Betsy wants the Zoom, so I'm going to text that to Betsy.
Maybe it's because the whole town is zooming, Richard, because of graduation.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, good. Always good to tell that you're actually connected.
Yeah, well, it's always good to know your voice works, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We can
We do
hear
this
you,
all the time,
Emily.
but hey, good to see you guys. I know we do this so often, but it's a different scenario each time with whether you connect or not.
All right, I sent it to Betsy. Mike said he's in. I'll send it to Marianne again.
I thought.
Oh, I'm good. I'm on,
Yeah.
Caroline.
Hey, cool. I just couldn't see. I had my window up. And Richard, I have it on
No
screen,
worries.
so you should be good to share your screen.
Okay. We'll get to that in a few minutes.
Thanks everybody for making such a short notice meeting. Really appreciate it. And Richard and Don, and when Betsy gets on, there's Betsy. When Betsy gets on, I just want to say thanks to everyone for making time for this and for providing questions so that Richard could think about these prior to jumping on. We wanted to definitely set up time ahead of, hey, Betsy,
Hey guys.
ahead of a meeting that involved the EMA. So at least we have our ducks and understanding in a row prior to that meeting. So I'm just going to actually turn it over to Richard.
There you go. And also want to thank Tim for joining at a late notice. He's been very, very helpful in working with Don Lundy on, looking at this building and what it might cost to build. So I just want to thank him. He also donated the time for the sketches because he is a proud dad of children who love the EMAA. So, thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. I just saw you on here.
So, I got your questions rather than ad hoc, I wrote some. So, it might take me a few minutes to read this. I'm not short on words, but hopefully by the time we get through it in 5 to 10 minutes, it will give you guys a pretty good understanding of the project and some of the questions and confusion that you had, and also maybe try to address some of the concerns as well. So I'm just going to read this through and then show you a couple screenshots that kind of maybe will put the project in a little better perspective, because based on some of the questions that you asked, I'm not sure that, you were looking at, the right screenshots and making extrapolations. So just want to make sure everybody's on the page with exactly what we're talking about. So, uh, I'll start with, trying to give you some understanding of why Mark and I are so interested in doing this and helping. And in my mind, Eagles Mirror is not the town that time forgot. It's a town that has been constantly changing. From its glass factory roots came a group of investors that imagined a first class resort. They built roads, railroads, hotels, theaters, general stores, gas stations, tennis courts, hiking trails, golf courses, horseback riding, and added boats, docks, and pavilions to the lake. In its time, with 5 new hotels, it was one of America's premier resorts. Since its heyday in the early 1900s, Eaglesmere has been constantly changing. When my parents were kids, they spent a lot of time at the casino, which I only learned recently wasn't actually a casino, and you couldn't gamble there. But it had bowling alleys, and they danced and they bowled and they played all kinds of organized games. And it was from one of the leaders of that, you know, parents or group, I don't know whether she was paid, that the beginnings of the EMAA came, and, where they took people from inside to outside and started doing outdoor activities. As a kid, I remember going to the playhouse in the park, where the last of the plays were still happening. I have pictures of my father acting in plays when he was a kid. Um, and during my childhood, I have fond memories of the sweet shop, and more specifically the Allegheny, as places where I spent my indoor time meeting friends and making new ones. And, I've talked to Tim about this, and he has the same story that I had. Um, you know, eh, you know, but fast forward related to how important the hub or the hideaway was for his kids. And, you know, you just can't imagine. And I have 4 daughters, and they went through different, scenarios. They're all different. One of my daughters, Margaret, she got up to Eagles Mirror and she instantly had a friends group, and she was calling people and she was organized. She landed and started partying with friends, or meeting friends, even from the time of, 12 or 10. Um, but my other daughters were more introverts and had a more difficult time engaging. And, this is really one of the nexus foundational things that I saw that I struggled with, because I wanted my kids to have the same Eagles Mirror experience I had. And so to me, the Allegheny was a place where, if you weren't the popular kid, or you weren't the person that spent the whole summer in Eagles Mirror and just got there on a Friday and didn't know who was there, or didn't, or maybe wasn't part of which is one of my youngest daughter's things, she wasn't part of the chat group. So they were keeping her out, and there were 2 people who weren't including her, and they weren't friends of her, and she was being blackballed. And you know, and it's just so stressful to think that you're not included. And, for me, the Allegheny was a place after dinner we went to, and it didn't matter if you were popular or not popular. There were kids there, and kids play with kids when they're present. So I just had that kind of experience in Eaglesmere, and I see some of the changes that have happened and the things we've lost, from the casino to the playhouse to the Allegheny, and the sweet shops changed the way although it became the only place that, after dinner, kids would go hang out there hoping to run into somebody. And I remember my daughter's like, "Where are you going?" To the sweet shop, to stand outside to hope maybe I'll be picked as somebody's friend. So to me, the EMAA really is the solution to this larger problem that our community faces. And so I'm giving you this background to better understand why Mark and I are willing to make the gift. We believe Eaglesmere needs to keep evolving. We have lost so much of our past, and many folks who grew up with the best Eaglesmere experience may not realize the challenges we face today in giving our kids the best Eaglesmere experience we can. The world is changing rapidly. The summers that used to last from Memorial to Labor Day are now compressed into 5 or 7 weeks. Kids are leaving their friends to come here. We need to engage these children and give them a memorable experience. We need to give them a sense of community and provide opportunities for them to engage with other children so they make new friends and develop strong connections to the place and the people that make Eaglesmere the special place that it is. And that, my friends, is exactly why we are doing this. That is the foundation of everything that you guys and we have been struggling with over the last 2.5 years to try to figure out how we can create that type of hub where kids can gather and join in reindeer games while the EMA is holding activities, rain or shine, or potentially gather there for evening activities when they're bored out of their mind, because nobody plays spades anymore. And so they get on their device and they lose themselves just like they do at home. So it's Mark and my belief that, in Eaglesmere, that's behind the support in this project. Mark has already spent millions on improving Eaglesmere. He has made significant contributions to the downtown, as I have. His leadership in helping to reopen the Eaglesmere Inn and giving families another dining option where there are so few cannot be understated. We both believe in making improvements to Eaglesmere so that we can all have a better experience while here. Think of how big of an impact the renovation of the country club was to revitalizing the club experience. While some in this town may want to keep it exactly like it is and may disagree with us, Mark and I believe we need to continue to make improvements where there is need. And that is, quite frankly, a crossroads that we know that 25% of the people, or 15% in the Eaglesmere, and I've talked to them, don't want another house built. They don't care if there's a restaurant. They don't care if there's a country club. They just want, so there are people who feel different. You have to respect them and hear them. But I'm just telling you, that's not how Mark and I feel. And that's, in a large part behind why we're doing this. Questions and concerns. It's also important that we have flexibility. We want to try and make this work, and we have not worked through every detail. We have goals and we can accomplish them as soon as, and we do have some flexibility in working through concerns and trying to make as many people happy as possible. That said, we do have some lines in the sand, and I will try to cover those as well. You had a lot of great questions. I'd like to address one or some of the hardest ones first, right off the back. And, that is what happens if Eaglesmere, if the EMAA or the EMA says no. As you all know, and like you, I've spent over 2.5 years working to make this happen, and I'm ready, quite frankly, for some closure. I just cannot keep going. Besides the expense, I have other projects, and would have been great if the original idea could have been executed and pulled off, but I think we learned a lot working together. Sadly, over the last 2 years, it became apparent that the annual expenses and efforts to manage and maintain the building would take away too much of the EMAA's focus from its core mission. That said, and speaking for myself, I think the core idea of providing the EMAA with a hub at the beach is still a great idea. That said, I'm eager to get a decision. If it is no, we are going to sell the property that the hideaway is located. In terms of the empty lot, if the decision is no, we have not reached the decision on exactly how we would dispose of it. Right now, the plan is to sell it with the building. The only promise that I have made with regards to the lot, and I made this to Mark Watts at the EMA, is that we would never let a residence be built there. And that's true today. For the sake of this conversation, I would not assume any more than that we will sell the property and we will make sure that a house is never built on the empty lot. Another question would be if we give the lot to the EMA and maybe build the building on some other EMA land that is not so close to the beach. There are several reasons why this is not an option for us. First, it would take additional time, and we're kind of done. And it would disrupt the EMAA's availability to having a space. And both Mark and I want to get this over as soon as possible. The main reason it would take additional time is that the EMA's bylaws only allow the EMA to lease property if they have 75% of their members vote in favor of the EMA engaging in a lease. That said, they can receive property without a member vote. And by giving them a property with a 50-year lease, we would satisfy any restrictions imposed by the bylaws. Another practical reason is that our members are more likely to allow their 7-year-old to run up to the Cub Hub, just a temporary name, if it is located where we are proposing. It is roughly the same distance as the beach shop. The answer to their kid's request might be very different if that kid is required to cross the road, cross the field of dreams, and go into the woods where people have suggested we build it. I would not let my 7-year-old do that. Please understand if this project is successful, and I'm sorry to bring this up, but it's important to understand this. First of all, it'll be the biggest donation I've ever had in my life, but many people don't understand the economics of making donations. $1 million donation, despite the allowable deductions, still cost us $1 million. If, the difference between a donation and, say, I buy a house is that to buy $1 million house, I have to make 1.3 million to 1.4 million because I'm going to pay taxes. So the $1 million house for my private use cost me 1,314, but the $1 million house as a deduction only cost $1 million, but still not only it's $1 million. Okay, just to understand. So if this is project, so the, what, just I'm sorry. Okay, we're moving on. What is significant to understand is if our gift is accepted, we will be spending well over $1 million here. We are committing $500,000 for construction, and we are committing $200,000 for an endowment to help offset future annual expenses. We are also donating the land, which is currently, was valued in the sale at over 200,000. And we have spent over to date, after this year, we have spent over $250,000 supporting the EMA's operations for 3 years. So we're well over $1 million if this happens. And why is it important for you to consider that? Is that some of your questions have been related to the size of the building. And somebody asked, I think there's a lot of concerns here, and, the size, I mean, somebody, said most people want to see it smaller and have less of an impact, but there was a definite concern about whether or not it'd even be big enough to do things, right? And originally it was, you know, it was a 40 by 80 space. And, quite frankly, until I get up there, I was concerned that might be too big of an impact on the space. I think I'm less concerned that that might be. So we shrunk it to 32 to 64. But the size is a direct relation to cost. And I'll ask Tim to address this when I'm done. But um, uh, even with a very simple design, we will have a hard time building this on budget. For presently our 32 by 64 two-story building, our initial estimates are over 500,000 at this point. So cost is a huge impact on how big of a building, even if we could make a bigger building fit, and maybe it needs a bigger building, cost is going to play a very important role because right now the budget is 500,000. Um, uh, if we get some sort of green light that the EMA and you guys are open to this, then we will start working on very specific um, plans that will have inputs on the needs of the EMA and the desires, whether or not a road to the basement, for example, was a question. You know, if that's an extra $15,000, then maybe, there is no road at this point, but that's something that could be built later. So we're going to break it down and get it down to the absolute budget, and then we're going to see where we're at. Um, and this is not something I mean, this is a something we're trying to get out so we can show the community this summer. Tim is going to work, you know, furiously with, um, probably Emily and another architect to try to get, some plans here and get some cost analysis on those plans and then get some really nice renderings so we can show this to the community. Um, we also, you know, are planning on designing a building that requires very little maintenance. Like as little as possible because our we know that the taxes will be somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000. Um, we're hoping closer to two. Right now they're for that lot under 2,000, but with a building, but then the valuations will change when the EMA owns it. So there's some bridges that cross there. But then we're just talking about the cost of electricity for 7 weeks. We are not planning on winterizing this building, but we will design it so it can be winterized. Again, we're trying to figure out how we can build this for $500,000. Okay, we're moving along here. Okay. Um, uh, and this is one of the reasons I'm going to move to site planning here, but this is one of the reasons I asked Tim Turner to join. I've probably have about 40 building projects, probably more under my belt at this point in my life, and I don't think but one of them has come under budget or come on budget. And there are I'm sure most of you have some experience with contractors, but rare is the day that you find a contractor that says something will cost X and then actually delivers at X. Tim is one of the few people I have ever met that actually can give you a budget and hit that budget because he does cost analysis and he's extremely well organized. He's in the trade and he's just a rare individual that if he says he's going to do something, he's going to work hell or high water to make sure. So, Don and I, we've been in Don has much more construction experience and management, property management experience. We've been in the trade, and we both hire people to build things for us all the time. But it is the rare unicorn to find somebody who can build on budget. And so, I'm just so thankful that Tim is part of this. Um, and let me move to um, some screen sharing here. Uh, and I will give you maybe some better context. Um, so I think this is what somebody was referring to, this picture. Um, and uh, and it was that is not, the size of the building. That is the best I could do in trying to hand draw on using my computer a space that's closer to what the setbacks are than the actual building. Um, and to look at I did this last night. This is, maybe not where it goes, but this should give you more perspective on uh, where, let me see if I'm trying to move this thing. Where that is in the footprint. So that would be a 32 by 64 building. You can see there is a lot of woods. Maybe it sits over here where my cursor is. Um, but, or even further, we will do site planning. We will figure it out. We'll stand on the beach. We'll stand at the house. We'll stand at the road. We'll stand everywhere, and we'll find the best placement. And also, the reason I send two plans to the EMA is we could potentially turn it 90 degrees and go perpendicular. There's a lot of options. The one option that we are trying to hit is if you follow this path, and this may not be a good rendering of it or even where it is, but I think it's probably close. For those of you who have gone back and forth to the beach many times, there's a green grass area right in here that isn't depicted. And then there's a trail. And we would like that trail to hit so the elevations are perfectly aligned with the door that we would have going to the basement, regardless of where we position this building on the space. We want that ground floor basement, to align with the natural elevations of the land. And when people asked about wetlands, the wetlands are down in here. The building will not be anywhere close to the wetlands. There are no wetland issues. There's no moisture. There's nothing that would be tagged or marked as a wetland concern. It's actually, there's a bench that goes to about right here that is level with the road. And, that's where we're trying to come in on the entrance this side. I'm a very feng shui and very anal about how things line up in spaces. And, I have one of the only basements in Wilmington, and I have one of the only houses where you walk in at ground level. You don't go up steps to get to your front door. And so for us, the only step getting into this building from the road will be a porch that's one or two steps. It will not be a staircase. It will be level if we do our job. And the same thing here. If we sink the basement a little, it might be a step or two down to the basement. But again, we're trying to get the elevations. We're trying to put this building in a way that it naturally, you know, fits into the landscape we have in the most natural way. And I think perhaps this picture shows best that we're not talking about big, um, a big thing. Now, I will go here and show you. I don't know if I can do this because of where it's placed. I don't think I can. Or maybe I can here. Okay. Nope. That's not it either. Maybe. Okay. Anyway, the original size, this is closer to a 40 by 80 building right here. Okay. And this was tucked in. If you if you mark that out, again, I don't think we could come in, but if you look at this and move this up to here, you're talking about another 8 feet and another 20 feet, and it would fit in here.
Richard, could you scan over, is the storage shed visible on this map,
Yeah, yes, it is.
the new one? I just thought
There,
that might be helpful.
there it is. I don't know the dimensions of the storage shed,
It's pretty big.
but it's pretty big. But
Yeah,
I
sorry, I
don't
just
think
thought that might be helpful.
it's a so basically if you think garages, 32 it would not be a 3-car garage. It would be a 2-car garage. Okay.
Right.
I don't know. Does the Hideaway have a 3-car?
Yeah, that's a big
Right.
It's a
swing
So
there.
3-car.
Yeah. Yeah.
it's hard to say where it comes in, but it's about the same distance as that.
Right.
Usually you have 12 feet per bay, and this is coming in. I'm sorry, it would be a 3-car garage. It's coming in at, so 12 feet would be 36 at a very minimum. Um, and at 64, I'm not exactly sure what that would line up. I actually am dyslexic, so I was doing the wrong math on that. But
So they could be a little deeper, right? Like, is that sort of the
so
indication?
again,
Yeah.
it's hard to answer all the questions about placement because we're just looking at a picture. And I think the next step is to go mark it out on the space, find the best location, put pins there. And so people, and maybe put some posts or something so they can see the height. And, something so people can get a perspective, and then to, get better renderings so they can see how it would fit into the plans. I am going to look for one more thing, which I may have.
Are there setback requirements from the road? And do you think that
Well,
there's
that's
some
what I'm
way
trying,
to get an
actually,
exception? Yeah, it'd be
that's
nice to get an exception to that with the Hideaway being so close to the road. It would be kind of nice to make sure.
it's funny you asked that because that's exactly the drawing I'm trying to come up with.
I think it's
Um,
50 feet.
See,
give
that's a
me,
shame in some way. Yeah.
so Tim, while I'm looking for that, the next last subject that I have to go over is control of how the lease and stuff would work. So I'm going to let Tim talk a little bit about, how he is, his involvement in this, and uh, and his involvement and how he's going about trying to hit a $500,000 budget, and then Don can add any thoughts to that as well. And, I will say before Tim goes, the only instruction that I've given Tim is that we're not building a cheap building. It's going to have wood on the outside. It's going to use good materials. We're not building a vinyl metal building to stick there. That would not fit into the ethos of the campus. It has to have a certain level quality, or Mark will not have his name to it. So there are some design requirements in terms of how nice this needs to be. We're thinking of all wood floors for the play surface. Because if you have a basement, if it were a flat thing, then we would do some rubberized coating over concrete. But if it was a 1-story building, but when you start having a basement, then you have trusses and joists, and you put a floor over it, and you can do much cheaper than wood. But again, we want this building to be here for 50 years, and we want it to be something people walk in and say, wow. So we cannot cut the quality in order to hit a budget. And, anyway, I'll let you go, Tim.
No, it's okay. Richard asked me to speak. They worked hard to do a design. And I always tell customers or anyone doing a building, there's two funnels in this thing. There's the design scope side and then a price side. And at the top, they're really wide and big ranges. And we're trying to kind of come down to as you work your way down the funnel on the design side, you can come down on the price side. But on the flip side of this project, the use isn't fully defined. Like we don't know the use. And we also don't know from a code perspective of how they're going to look at it. So, all that being said, the prints are out here. I think we need to get to a point where we at least know that it's a project, that some of these, and I would stress this, it's just a concept. Like we're at a concept level. Many iterations and changes, I assume, will happen till we get there. But that's really all I have. Unless you
Well,
want me
for example, you know, code is what's going to kill us, and so every time you add something, for example, even just a staircase from the basement to an interior staircase in the basement to the first floor, besides using space, would kick off a lot more code requirements for what we would do in that basement. Um, so, if we label it storage, it's a lot less. If we label it, so we're going through, you know, what we need to do to be forthright, but at the same time, what's the minimum amount we need to do in order to, not have to put, this is a bad example because I don't think we'd have to, but sprinkler systems in or something like that, you know, um, or
Just think of the
wheelchair.
Dwyer Center or something. The lower tech you can keep it,
Right.
the better it is. Because it isn't it will be kind of an assembly space. So we do need to be responsible for the space we're creating, to make sure that it meets, life safety and ADA requirements.
I was about to say, and accessibility issues.
Right.
Sure.
But keeping it simple is definitely the goal,
Right.
without, yeah. Right.
So someone asked a question about setbacks. I'll jump to that real quick, because here is, you know, which, now that you've seen that other photo of my horrible attempt at drawing the space, this is the lot, okay? And it's not even all covered in this. There's the lot. So maybe if I shrink it, I can get it all in one picture.
But back to your point, Richard, I mean, if the EMA buys in, EMA and everyone wants to do this on some level, then you go for a variance and maybe we put it up.
Yeah,
Like the park
I think
got
we'd want
4
to. Yeah.
variances last summer or whatever, last fall on projects, I think it's worth the
I
conversation.
think people would be inclined to consider moving it closer, getting it sited properly, than sticking to the setbacks. I would hope.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, these are the current setbacks. So this is
Right.
what, so
You got to
if,
start with what you're given. It's true.
right.
It's
So
true. You're
this
doing the right
outside
thing. Yeah.
line is the lot. And I'm not sure who, Tim, was this you or Don who determined the setbacks for this,
It's in the zoning
it's in the
based
zoning?
on our
Okay. So
district. I think
this
it's
would be the
R1.
setbacks. Ignore the pathway. That was the draftsman, attempting to connect the, building to the beach and road. That's not, I wish I could have gotten rid of it, but, we're asking them to do a lot in short notice. So, um, but that's kind of where a 32 by 64 building would sit in this lot. Um, you know, and so perhaps that gives you some, and, this is the, there are woods that go to here, you know, so if I looked at this, the EMA owns, I believe, so maybe I set it too close to this house, but the EMA owns some point, I think, right around this bend, right there. If you can all see that, becomes the EMA owned property. So it's a big lot. Um, and we just need to find the best place if we're moving forward with where we can site locate this. And I will open up to any, oh, no, I'm sorry. Let me finish with perhaps the most, important thing. So EMA control of the building. How will the relationship with the EMA work? This is a big topic, and probably this topic has the most amount of flexibility. But roughly, the EMA will own the land and the building. The lease will be designed to be as close to net neutral for both parties as possible. The lease could be $1 a year for the EMAA, but the EMAA would be responsible for taxes and expenses. And there's a very specific reason for that. The foundation can only make donations to 501(c)(3)s. The beach is not a 501(c)(3). The EMA is. So if we're going to get a respectable organization to manage the endowment, which I think everybody would support the foundation as being that manager, then we need to put the expense burden on the EMAA so that those donations can come from the foundation to cover those expenses. We will do analysis to see if 10K is a year is enough, but we believe it'll cover most of the expenses. And beyond that, this is a question we had from the beginning of the hideaway. I understand that some, really care about control more than others. But, in my mind, the natural sort of middle of the road would be for the EMAA to have full control of the basement for their storage, for their offices and their swags, and a place where they could keep stuff year round without anyone worrying about, other people messing with their stuff. The activity center above is the gathering space. It's where people gather, it's where people do things. And, the EMAA has a pretty defined season at this point. And, and current, programming is 7 weeks or so. And so, Betsy, really didn't go, that full on in trying to drive additional revenue for the hideaway. But we know that there's some demand for spaces in Eaglesmere where it could potentially be leased out privately for events. And in that case, that would be a revenue generator. But, it's also my and Mark's, goal that, this has some community, involvement or, opportunity for community events that, make our community stronger. The devil's in the details of how you manage that and whether it would be the EMA managing that or the EMAA managing that. But, I think if we basically all agree and that this is a good thing for Eaglesmere, it's a good thing for our children, it's a good thing for the EMAA in terms of how they organize, their mission around, the activities at the beach. I think that the rest of it, can be worked out in a way that, creates as much as a win-win for everyone. So, but I'm not, as long as it meets that criteria, that's the goal. We have, and we don't, and the other thing that we're trying to do here is to eliminate as much as possible anything that would take the EMAA away from its core mission. Um, I don't need to get on a soapbox and tell you how much effort is spent on the tennis court. And we certainly saw firsthand how much effort was required by both Don Lundy, Betsy Way, Mary Ann, Ryan's crew, just to keep that hideaway operating without and keeping the lights on and keeping the heat on and having the emergency calls when there was a bat in the house and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's just a lot, and it's not just expenses, it's time. And so time is the most valuable commodity that we all have. So we need to design this to be the most simple while still looking great and still fulfilling its mission, the most simple building we can build from a maintenance and management standpoint. And then we need to sit down with the EMA if everyone's in agreement and work out a structure that works for everyone. Betsy,
Richard, thank you.
thoughts on that?
Thank you so much. Betsy, did you have something? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're on
You're on mute, babe.
You're on mute, Betsy.
Okay. No, I just want to thank Richard. Richard has these past 2 years, 3 years, I mean, he's given us a gift to run with. And if people can't see this as a good thing, then shame on them. I mean, we are trying to sustain Eaglesmere community for a lot of years for our children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and this is it. This is a
You have
really
great grandchildren already?
no, but I will.
He'll be first.
We're at a point in the road here, and we need to take the high road, and we need to do this. I'm excited about the possibility. And I just think, I just hope that everybody will be also. I know what Eaglesmere has done to my
Betsy's
children.
done so much.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I mean, all of us have, believe me. We all have, donated our time. It's a lot. It's a lot. And, you don't get paid for volunteering, but I want to do this. I want to do it for the future of Eaglesmere.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the talking point right there, Betsy, that I just want us all to think about as we're discussing this moving forward, is that this isn't just about doing something nice for our membership, right?
No.
This is about making Eaglesmere an even more attractive place for future families, our families,
Mhm.
future families who have nothing to do with Eaglesmere, renters who come and may want to buy a house here or build a house here. We cannot, it's been shown time and time again that we cannot continue at the pace that we are, or we will not have families who come here and stay here. And then we
Exactly.
won't be able to support any of it. And honestly, it's almost like, I don't, for those of you who belong to churches, like it's about the value of the youth program that makes people stay at
Mhm.
churches and in communities, right? You may literally switch churches even if you love the minister because their youth program sucks. So this is something that's, I think from the viability of the community really matters, and how we get our grandchildren to want to come here instead of going down to the shore or playing travel soccer all the time. So
Mhm.
how about I'm going to open the floor to questions for Richard or
I,
Betsy
I
or
have
Don or Tim.
I have two things quickly just to say. I
Justine.
Yeah, I just think it's so generous, and that it's nice that we have members of the community that are willing to be this generous to help everybody. Like I get excited thinking about my kids for it. And then also my other thought was that people's immediate reaction is usually no to any kind of change. That's just what is in us, to just immediately say no, because it's a change. I know I do it with my kids until you think about it, right? People were so upset about the beach renovation. And now, does anyone even think twice about it? No. So I think we need to expect that there would be backlash regardless, but that's just because that's what is innate to people, to just immediately say no when there's a change. But to remind them how good of a thing this could be for the future.
Thanks,
Well,
Justine.
thank you for that, because that's at the core of this, question, right? I, first want to just say, you know, Betsy, thank you so much. Don, thank you so much. And all of you. I mean, like, I do have some insights to how the EMA meeting went, and I feel like it went very well. But there are people who are going to vote no. And there are people maybe on your board who are going to vote no. And so you're never going to change their minds, right? Right.
But
And
Richard, I see those people sitting on the porch because the sun is too hot. Or
right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe, I think this
like,
building actually will provide for everybody in
I think
Eaglesmere,
it's
so,
gonna have
yeah,
a
yeah.
huge range. I see
Right. So,
restaurants,
Yeah.
but the
babies.
reason I bring up that story,
But they don't see it, they don't see it yet, yeah,
the
yeah.
reason I bring up that story is that there are some things that haven't gotten done in Eaglesmere because 10 or 15% of the people are very loud, complain to the end of the earth, and it's just not worth fighting them. But there are some things worth fighting. If you believe in this, you've got to be strong, because without that strength, we're not going to get it done. And so, great analogy on the beach improvement project. There were people who were like die on the stake on that, and just blown away that the EMA would be so callous to fix the beach up of its swampy beach. And it's and I mean, some people still don't think it looks better, but most people think it looks better. It fixed a lot of drainage issues, sedimentation going into the beach. And, it was done with good hearts by good people who wanted to make an improvement, and they got nothing but shit for doing it.
Mhm.
And so you got to be strong if you believe in something. And and anyway,
Well, one of my
I'll
favorite
answer
things
any
about
questions now.
the beach renovation allowed people who couldn't come to the beach to actually enjoy the beach by making it more accessible and a little bit more comfortable for more people. So I think it's interesting. I know some people were relieved that they could get back to the beach in a comfortable way without all the steps and swampy conditions and things. Like it allowed more people to actually, the irony is it allowed more people to enjoy the beach. So
Exactly. Do we have any other questions?
I have one. What is the next step? So you have, so the EMA has met, correct?
Okay, so the next step is that on the 28th, there's a Zoom, and the EMA is going to do the same thing. They're going to submit their questions and we're going to answer them. But I think it's extremely important. The reason I asked Marianne for this meeting is that the EMAA has a position going into that, if because there's no reason to have the meeting if you guys don't, if this is a bridge too
Right.
far and you don't want to do it, or you have questions, what I mean, you gotta either want it or not want it. Because if you don't want it, then there's no reason for the EMA to meet and debate this.
Right.
Um, and so, the next step is that meeting. And then, I'm going to rely on, what I do in all my projects, and that is build a team that's better organized than I am, that will look at this like a project, and what we need to do to communicate with the community, the members, the planning, and and with the goal of trying to have an approval from the EMA by the end of the summer. Because if we have an approval by September, we can get permits by October, hopefully. And I'm putting a team together that I believe can have this built by June, um, so that the EMAA does not lose any of their season, in the transition from the hideaway to the hub. And I'm stealing the name hub from, Mark Johnson, because, you know, the
It's
beach
very
hub.
cute. The Cub Hub's
Yeah,
very cute.
the Cub Hub. I looked at names for
The
kids, and
Bear
I was
Cub Hub.
like,
Love it.
like Eagle Cub. Eaglets doesn't do it to me. So, uh,
Yeah. No, I love it.
One
anyway,
final issue here.
Go ahead, John.
Just for back for Richard, is obviously anyone who has negativity, they obviously get more traction than those who are for a project. So it's back to what Richard said. Also, for pulling this together, I lived my life for 30, 40 years with definitive releases. So all the little nuances, all the things people are going to worry about, we'll have that nailed down in a definitive release that will live for 30 or 40 years. I do it in and out. I have Tim Turner will get this thing built, and there'll be no questions. I mean, it's what we do for 11. So for all those who question this thing, I mean, that's how we make our 11. So it will get done.
Thanks, Don.
I don't want to cut anyone off from having any questions. Emily or Rain, Rachel, I know you're on there too with Tim. Does anyone have any other questions, Justine, before we jump off? And actually, if the EMAA could stay on quickly, just for a few minutes, I'd appreciate it.
And the final one too is if they don't like the project, it goes up for sale. Someone buys it and can put up a 6-car garage. So this is the perfect opportunity for someone to accept $1 million gift and control the property versus the new owner
Right.
tell little Johnny to jump off the swing because that property runs into the EMA and they can clear cut every tree they want. So this is the opportunity to get what everyone was complaining about for 30 years, control,
Taken care of.
and $1 million donation. It wins.
well, Don, you brought up a good point, and I didn't answer another question, so I'll just do that. And thank you, Don, for reminding me of that. Somebody else asked, "Are we allowed to build this? Would we be able to get a permit?" And the answer is, there's absolutely no reason that I see. You never say never, but we're zoned for this. We, by right should be able to do this. We don't need to seek a variance to get this done unless we're going to move it on the site and put it in different places. But if we stay within the building envelope, if we stay to the, everything we're talking about, it's just it's like submitting a building permit for a house in a approved lot. So we don't see a problem with that. And then one other thing, which I'm not going to remember because I started with that, but anyhow,
Feel
think
free
we-
to email me, Richard, if you remember, and I'll share it, okay?
Yep. So to Don's point, we will get this done, if it's approved and we move forward. We will find a path. This is a community project, and quite frankly, I just don't see how people can really stand up on a soapbox and fight this in any way that would stop it, if the community wants it.
Thank you so
All right, yep.
much for taking
Yeah,
this
very
time with
exciting.
us.
Thank you,
We
Richard.
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you,
Bye,
Richard.
you guys. We'll be
All
in
right,
touch.
well, good
Thanks,
luck.
Richard.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
John,
Thank you.
Tim.
Bye.
See, thank you guys.